All right, so we are on our bacb.com website, and you have a variety of options here. You're going to go to Obtain a Credential. Click that link. Good. And it's going to say Become Credentialed, and it gives you a variety of different credentials here. And we are going to specifically choose our Registered Behavioral Technician. So go ahead and click that link. And it should pop up the Registered Behavioral Technician page. All right, so you can read through this on your own time. It tells you a little bit about the credentialing process, the ethics and discipline, and then it gets into the supervision requirements. So let's read through that together because it's very important that you have the appropriate form of supervision as you go through the credentialing process, because when you're finished, you have to have a supervisor sign off that you did complete the coursework and that you are able to implement all of the skills and training that we went over across the course sequence. So it says the RBT will have at least one responsible certificant who is publicly listed in the RBT registry. This certificate is responsible for ensuring the RBT is working under the supervision of a BCBA certificate. So we as BCBAs, if we're providing this course, we went through a training process ourselves in order to be certified to give you this course sequence. So you have to make sure that if for some reason you need to stop taking this course and you need to start with another supervisor, that they are a registered certificate, and you can find them on the RBT registry. All right, so going forward, let's go down a little bit, talk a little bit about obtaining the RBT credential further. Applicants must be 18 years of age. You have to have a minimum of a high school diploma and complete 40 hours of training that is specified to the task list. You also have to complete a criminal background check, pass the RBT competency assessment, and pass the RBT exam. Now, the RBT competency assessment is something that you will take at the end of our 40-hour course sequence. When you complete the 40 hours, you'll be provided a test. This is not a standardized test. This is something that's individual to the proctor or the supervisor who's teaching the 40-hour course sequence. So there are going to be things on that test that are going to be specific to the videos that you're watching across this training to ensure that you really are comprehending and following all of the teaching materials provided. Once you take that competency assessment, I will provide you, or another supervisor will provide you, with a 40-hour completion checkoff sheet. It's basically like a certificate that says, yes, you passed the 40-hour coursework and the exam, and you are qualified to be able to take the RBT exam. The RBT exam is going to be found, again, on this BACB website. You're going to have to log on after this 40-hour course sequence independently and supply them with a variety of information. And we'll follow up at the end of our 40-hour course sequence on exactly what those steps are so that you're prepared for that process afterwards. Then it says maintaining an RBT credential. RBTs are required annually to pass the RBT competency assessment. Complete a renewal, receive ongoing supervision, and comply with the BCBA's ethics requirements relevant to RBTs. So if you want more information, there's another link there that you can click. But in brief summary, each year you're going to have to complete an RBT assessment online, okay? It's quick, it's easy, no big deal, but it just shows that you're maintaining all of the knowledge that was initially taught to you in that 40-hour course sequence. Okay, because if you're a BCBA like myself, then you actually have to get a certain number of CEUs every year, okay, which are basically we attend conferences, we read certain journal articles. There are different ways that we can acquire those, but it shows that we're maintaining our knowledge and we're staying up to date when it comes to relevant BCBA standards and research that's out there. And then every few years, we have to submit our own sort of packet to the BCBA to maintain our credential as well. And then another part of this, which is very important, we talked about before, that you need to receive ongoing supervision. And so let's talk a little bit more about what that looks like, because it is going to be a complex process. So you can go back up to the top. We're going to go to Home. We're going to go to Maintaining a Credential. There we go. Okay, so again, you're going to click the RBT specific link. Maintaining your credential. The primary RBT maintenance requirement is to satisfactorily complete the 12 task directed observation RBT competency assessment. The rationale for this requirement is that since the RBT is frontline worker who implements behavioral analysis procedures, annual demonstration of satisfactory implementation of the 12 tasks in a precise and timely manner is of utmost importance to ongoing success of behavior plan. So we had already talked about that. That's where you kind of show that you're maintaining all of that information that you've gained. Okay? Going forward, you also have to complete the competency assessment, which we talked about. Submit completed renewal applications on the required schedule via the RBT renewal application. So I'm not sure if it's a yearly or bi-yearly, but we'll get into that more at the end of the training again. And you need to have a responsible certificate on record with the BACB. And you need to have appropriate amounts of supervision, which is outlined a little bit further below here. There we go. It talks a little bit about the fee structure. So supervision. The purpose of supervision is to improve and maintain the behavioral, analytic, professional, and ethical repertoires of the RBT and facilitate the delivery of highly qualified services to his or her clients. Effective behavioral analytic services include, it gives you a variety of things, basically developing performance expectations, observing behavioral intervention skills, modeling technical, professional, ethical behavior, and the list goes on. And obviously we'll cover all of these things in our RBT training. But most importantly, let's talk about the hours that you need to be supervised in order to maintain your credential. So each RBT must maintain ongoing supervision for a minimum of 5% of the hours spent providing behavioral analytics services per month. Okay? So you can kind of break that down in your mind. If you're working 20 hours per week in a behavioral analytics service environment, then what percentage of that time do you actually need to be supervised? So as we go forward, some of those hours might change, some might increase, some might decrease, and it is your responsibility to log those hours yourself and communicate with your supervisor how many hours you need for supervision that month. Supervision must include at least 2 face-to-face synchronous contacts per month, during at least one of which the supervisor observes the RBT providing services. So again, this is an important part, okay? So not all of our meetings have to be in person. We can do them via a computer or video chat, something like that. But at least one of those meetings, you need to supply direct observation of you working in some behavioral analytic format. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that your supervisor has to see you doing it in person, but they need to see you doing it somehow. So you could provide them with a video of you providing those services, and that could be adequate to meet that, that piece. All right, so I'll let you go on. You can have supervision in small group formats, whole group formats, individual. But if you have any other questions, this gives you a lot of detail to refer back to. All right. So, like we said again, at the end of our training in the 40 hours, we'll wrap up by reviewing this all and going over the credentialing process, especially those steps that you need to take thereafter you have completed the 40-hour training to get your credential and maintain it. All right, everyone, welcome back. So, in our previous session, we discussed about how to obtain and maintain your RBT credentialing. So, today we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the task list that we're going to work through across this course sequence. All right, so to first begin, if you can either follow along with a computer or you can follow along with your PowerPoint sheet, and we're going to be working through the RBT task list summary. So I'm going to show you how to also do this on the computer so that if you want to refer back to the website, you know where to go. So again, we're at our bacb.com website, and I had clicked the About Credentialing link, and we are within our Registered Behavior Technician platform. You're going to go down to where it says Obtaining an RBT Credential. Okay, and we're going to click here for more information. And then it'll bring up information regarding your eligibility criteria, your age, education, background check, all of that we discussed before. But then it also goes into the RBT competency assessment and task list. So we're going to click that. It comes in a variety of formats in case English is not your first language. Click the link that's appropriate. And it'll bring up a 3-page document that describes the task list. So it says that the task list includes the core tasks that are likely to be performed by behavioral technicians. These tasks are organized into the following areas: measurement, assessment, skill acquisition, behavior reduction, documentation and reporting, and professional conduct and scope of practice. The task list covers tasks that our practicing behavioral technician will perform with some, but probably not all, clients. It is acknowledged that there might be other tasks not listed here that a behavioral technician would be expected to perform by a supervisor. It is the responsibility of the supervisor then to determine which additional tasks the behavioral technician may perform as a function of their competence. All right, so it also serves as a curriculum for the training required by all candidates of the RBT credential. And the training requirements are as follows. Must cover all of the tasks and subtasks within the RBT task list. We talked about this before, the duration needs to be at least 40 hours worth of training on this task list. At least 3 hours of the training must be devoted specifically to the ethics and conduct-based skills within this task list. And you can be instructed about the task list via either an online platform or in person. And it must be completed within a 180-day period. All right, so moving on to the tasks, we'll start off with measurement. Measurement here includes preparing for data collection, implementing continuous measurement procedures, implementing discontinuous measurement procedures, implementing permanent product recording procedures, and entering data and updating graphs, okay? So this is all about how we collect our data. Depending on where you're working or who you're working with, you're going to use different instruments in order to do this. And so we're going to talk briefly about various types of instruments and different ways that we can collect data. Then we're going to move on to assessment. Assessment is describing the behavior and environment in observable and in measurable terms. Remember, we talked about how in behavioral analysis, we are only interested in studying behavior that we can see and that we can put a number to so that it is measurable. We're going to be able to conduct preference assessments. That means doing assessments with individuals to figure out what things they enjoy, what might be able to use in a teaching session to increase their motivation in order to learn the skills that we're putting forth. Then assist with individual assessment procedures. These might be curriculum-based, developmental, or social skills. So I'm sure you've seen some curriculum-based assessments in schools, or like when you go to college, obviously those are curriculum-based. But then you also might do more things like developmental-based, and we'll be talking about some of those specific curriculums when it comes to the ABLES or the VB map that really assess a range of developmental areas. And that helps to inform our practice and pick and choose programs that are going to be put into play for those individuals we might work with. And then assist with functional assessment procedures. So a functional assessment is used to assess exactly why a behavior might be occurring and why it is maintained over time. Why does it keep occurring? Okay? And then from those assessment results, we can inform an FBA or a functional behavioral assessment. And then typically that's what we use to write a behavioral intervention plan for the students. And typically, if you are a registered behavioral technician, you most likely will come across a behavioral intervention plan and or are doing so now and are primarily responsible for implementing it. All right, then we have skill acquisition. Identifying the essential components of a written skill acquisition plan. So this might be a behavioral skill, or it could be more of an academic skill or a developmental skill. Such as identifying objects or responding to a social skills question, such as what's your name? And they respond, my name is Lindsay, okay? But we'll teach you how to read one of those sheets because they're written with such structure. Again, remember this is going back to our dimensions of behavioral analysis. They're written in such a way that anyone can pick up a sheet and read it as long as they are trained and they know the behavioral terminology that goes along with that. Does anyone remember what that term is? We'll get into it a little bit more later. But moving forward, we're going to prepare for sessions as required by the skill acquisition plan. So knowing what materials, what your setup looks like, if you're going to be doing more of direct teaching instruction at a table, or if you're going to be doing incidental work or floor time therapy. Use contingencies of reinforcement. This is conditioned, unconditioned reinforcement, continuous, intermittent schedules. So being able to reward individuals for positive behaviors or behaviors that we're looking to increase using a variety of different systems. Implement discrete teaching procedures. Again, that's going back to more of that DTI work and exactly how that looks like in all the steps to that teaching process. Implementing task analyzed chaining procedures. That's when you have a more complex task, such as washing your hands, right? There's a lot of steps that go into that. There's you walk over the sink, you turn on the water, you put your hands under the water, get them wet, get some soap, and the chain goes on. For individuals with disabilities, that is far too many steps, right? So instead we break down all of those steps, teach them incrementally. First, go to the sink. Good, when they get to the sink, then we give them that prompt. Turn on the water, right? Because they can handle those one steps. And then once they figure out all of those steps, then we combine them and teach them the total task sequence. So that's what chaining is. Implementing stimulus control transfer procedures. So that's very complex and wordy way of bringing the understanding that certain things have labels and that they are the correct labels for things. And that if you correctly label something or identify something, then often you get rewarded from that, whether it's a social reward or just basic understanding from somebody knowing what you're talking about. And it goes a little bit further than that. We'll stop there, but just the idea that a stimulus is everything and anything in the environment, anything that can have a label, okay? And then over time, kids learn, people with disabilities learn that all of those things have names, okay? And that's essentially what stimulus control is. All right, we're gonna go on to implement stimulus fading procedures. So that's when we teach a stimulus or we teach something, and then slowly we might fade out that stimuli to decrease that individual's need to have that visual or auditory, some sort of prompt to help cue them in as to exactly what that is. So for example, you know, you might have the letter A. You're teaching a child the letter A. First, you might start off with a full outline of an A, and you say, what is it? And they say, A, right? Or you say, what makes this sound ah? And you have the visual A. And then once they learn that after a few weeks, they're like, A, good. Then after a few weeks, you break in, well, now I'm going to try to fade this out a little bit. So instead of having the full visual outline, maybe you completely fade it out so it's barely there, but if they need the reminder, they can go back and look, and it's just kind of a shadow of an A. So then you say, what says the sound ah? Hopefully they independently respond. If not, they can look back and get that prompt again, right? But our hope is to, over time, we can completely fade that out so that when you ask that question, they can respond without relying on that visual to help them. So that's a stimulus fading procedure, and we'll learn more about that when we talk about DTI. All right, implementing prompt and prompt fading procedures, we just talked about. Implementing generalization and maintenance procedures. So not all skills are generalized. That means that even though they learn it in one setting or from one person or within one context, they're naturally going to be able to generalize that to a different setting. So for example, if you taught Lucy to say hi when she walks in the classroom and said hi to her teacher, chances are when she walks into the classroom, she's not going to automatically say hi to Kara, who's the support teacher, right? She hasn't automatically generalized that skill. So we have to plan for generalization, which means we need to teach across multiple people, across multiple settings, and multiple stimuli. And maintenance procedures are exactly what it sounds like. How do we maintain their learning over time? All right. Implement generalization and maintenance procedures, then assist with training of stakeholders. This is a great way to increase generalization and automatically include maintenance, right? Because consistency is key. If we teach this skill not only in our current setting, wherever you're working with that child, but if we can work collaboratively with those primary stakeholders, other people who are going to have lots of contact with that individual, then we can ensure that that skill might increase across all settings and stay for a really long period of time. All right. So that's skill acquisition. Let's go on to behavior reduction. Identify the essential components of behavior reduction plans. So again, how do we work through that behavioral intervention? Okay, what are those key phrases? Describe common functions of behavior. So there are 4 main functions of behavior. We have escape or avoid, and then gain access to attention, gain access to tangible items or activities, and then the 4th is what we call alone or a sensory condition. We're going to learn more about those as we go into our functional piece of the training. Then implement interventions based on modifications of antecedents, such as motivating or establishing operations and discriminative stimuli. It's all very wordy piece, but essentially is talking about how can we alter things to make it more likely that this individual is going to learn or is going to decrease a behavior. All right. Implement differential reinforcement procedures. This stands for, basically, we're going to, for an example, DRO, differential reinforcement of other behaviors. So as long as a behavior isn't occurring, In the absence of it, we're going to provide reward and reinforcement for the positive behaviors, okay? So we're differentially reinforcing certain moments to make it more likely that we're decreasing or increasing positive behaviors, okay? So then we go on to implement extinction procedures. Extinction is when you no longer provide reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. Oftentimes we use what's called planned ignoring strategies, and we'll talk about this more as well. Implement crisis emergency procedures according to protocol. Typically a behavioral intervention plan will include some of these, or if you work for a school, sometimes schools are hesitant to include an emergency or a crisis plan within it. So we'll discuss about how you go finding what that protocol is and exactly what you should be following when there is an unsafe situation either for yourself or the people that you're working with. All right, moving on to section E, documentation and reporting. Report other variables that might affect the client: illness, relocation, medication, these are obvious. Generate objective session notes by describing what occurred during sessions. Again, this is really important. We don't ever want to build in kind of that, well, it just seemed to appear out of nowhere, right? Or hint to things that might be internal, like, well, I think he did it because he was angry at me. There's no think. We really describe behavior in observable and measurable terms so that we can track and monitor progress over time. And this is an area of difficulty. We've really got to work and get in the train of thought that individuals aren't acting in a malicious way. Okay, they're acting based on previous experiences, and they're acting in order to gain access to something. And that's why we do our functional behavioral assessments and write a behavior plan, so that we really take out that emotionality piece to behavior. Effectively communicate with supervisor. This is a no-brainer. Communication is key to many parts of an intervention, whether the intervention is going well or it's not going well. You're the person or people that are going to be working directly with these clients, so it's really, really important that you have effective communication so that if something isn't going well, we can stop it before it snowballs and become a bigger problem. Comply with applicable legal, regulatory, and workplace reporting requirements. This is an unfortunate but very true part of what we do, is having to report abuse and neglect if necessary. Comply with applicable legal, regulatory, and workplace requirements for data collection, storage, and transportation. So, for example, something that would fall in this realm is what you do with old documents that might be lying around, or old reports that maybe someone has shared with you that you no longer need. We can't just throw it away, right? Because it has our individual's name on it, probably their date of birth, where they go to school or where they live. All of those things should be kept confidential, and best practice is to shred papers like that. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that in the future. And last but not least, we have professional conduct and scope of practice, which includes that ethics course. So we're going to be describing the role of RBT in the service delivery system, respond appropriately to feedback, and maintain or improve performance integrity, right? Feedback is not always negative. To me, feedback is constructive because it's an opportunity to improve on myself and my practice. Communicating with stakeholders, how best to do that, and exactly what your role is when it comes to communicating with other stakeholders. Sometimes some things are just better left up to your supervisor or your teacher to be able to handle situations, and in that way, you can maintain your role and be within your scope of practice. And then maintaining professional boundaries. This happens a lot in places of employment, especially because a lot of what we do is emotional. And although it's very rewarding, we're working with families and other individuals, and sometimes, they want to show gratitude, or they might become, a little overly friendly with you, and it's hard to walk a gray line and maintain professionality. And then last but not least, maintaining client dignity, which is, of course, one of our most important parts of what we do, because we always want to work within our client's best interest and maintain that golden rule. Okay? All right, so that about wraps up our RBT task list, and I'm looking forward to working through it with you in the future.